We're going to be in John chapter 13 today. And if you have a Bible with you, you can go ahead and turn to that. If not, you can use the one in the pew in front of you. And if you don't have one at all, that's our gift to you. Or you can always go to the URL, bcnazarene.org/gatherings, and all the notes and scripture and everything is right there. And while you're turning there, I'm going to go ahead and pray a word of prayer over us for the time that we have left in our gathering. And if you're turning there in your Bible, keep turning, find your spot. God hears our prayers even while our eyes are open. So there we go. Let's pray. God, I am grateful to gather together with these people this morning. And for the things we've experienced, for the things we've been able to participate in. Father, my prayer is that when we walk out the doors this morning, that our lives will be different. Whether it's something that we think, something we're going to do, a next step that we have taken, something we're going to participate in. I pray that we would be different. And Lord, for the passage that we're going to dive into this morning, as troubling as it may be in certain parts, I ask that it would help us see you in a new way and see how we can become more like you in our daily lives. And I pray this in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. So this is John chapter 13, and we're going to start in verse 4. And this passage is Jesus is gathering together with his closest followers, with his disciples, and we see this interaction take place, starting in verse 4. It says, "So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him." If we could pause right there for a second. There are two different levels within this passage in which it makes us feel, I'll say, uncomfortable, or that like sticks out where there's tension for us. The first level is there is a cultural distinction between this passage and ours. And we just need to acknowledge that first off, that like we don't wash each other's feet, right? This is not a common thing. Like if like washing someone's feet just doesn't happen today. If you were to go out to eat after service, you were to use the restroom, you were done, you turn to wash your hands, which is what we're supposed to do. It would not be a problem to see someone else who you didn't know there washing their hands, correct? Like this would not throw us off, especially if they worked there. You'd be like, oh, thank goodness, this is good, we're good. If that person had taken their shoes and socks off, had rolled up their pants, was sitting on the counter, and had their feet in the sink, this would be troubling, right? So like we just need to acknowledge there's a cultural distinction there that's different. These people walk around all the time, they wore sandals, and so this is something that happened. They would wash their feet, or a servant would come wash their feet before a meal. So immediately that throws us off. But this is what I always want to look at when I'm studying scripture. And I hope just this maybe little tidbit is helpful for when you look at it on your own, is I always want to pay attention to what bothered the people in Jesus' day. Because like if something happens that doesn't bother anyone, I usually view that in a sense of like there's a cultural difference there. Like if he said this thing and everyone was cool with it, I go, okay, I need to understand more about first century culture to understand what's taking place. But when people respond like awkwardly or uncomfortably to something that takes place, then I know, okay, we're dealing with something that has to do with just humanity as a whole. This isn't just a cultural distinction. This is something that kind of gets at the depth of our humanness in terms of what takes place. And so we see there's a cultural distinction, but the disciples also respond uncomfortably, in particularly Peter. This is in verse 6. It says, "When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, 'Lord, are you going to wash my feet?' And Jesus replied, 'You don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will.' It says, 'No,' Peter protested, 'you will never, ever wash my feet.' And Jesus replied, 'Unless I wash you, you won't belong to me.'" And I'd like to pause right there. So this is what is interesting to me, is there's not just a cultural distinction that makes Peter uncomfortable. There is something about Jesus' actions and the posture that Jesus is taking that makes Peter feel uncomfortable in this moment. And so today we are in the second part of this series, Postures. And the idea of this series is really simple, is that our posture affects us physically, but our posture also affects us relationally. That the posture that we take in our relationships dramatically impacts our relationships. So last week we started with this idea that the majority of us have postured ourselves in this way. We are a high five or a hand wave, a quick hello kind of culture. We have postured ourselves for lots of acquaintances. And we need to shift that posture from acquaintances to more of an arm-in-arm posture. We need to have more people who we can stand beside, who we know that we can trust, we can count on, which is what our whole thing on Starting Point in these groups has been all about. And this today, I want to take that a step further, and we're actually going to have this message is somewhat going to carry over into Wednesday night as part of the family meeting, which you can read about in your bulletin or online. I won't go into all that now. But instead of just talking about how we need to posture ourselves with a few people, which is this arm-in-arm posture, I want to look at how we need to posture ourselves with everyone. So what does our posture look like just in our general day-to-day life, regardless of who we're with? And in order for me to explain that, I need to tell you about a couple things that make me mad. Okay? Could we start with that? Could this be little ranty, little soapboxy, and then a lot sermon? Are we comfortable with that? Yes. Well, I've got the stage, so what are you going to do at this point? So things that annoy me. All right, first one, this annoys me. When I'm driving down the interstate and the sign reads, left lane ends 1 mile, and I'm in the right lane because I'm responsible and not a maniac, and I don't want to get any more tickets. That's the reality of it. I don't want to get any more tickets. And I'm in the right lane, and there's no one on the road, and someone in the left lane is right beside me. Not busy, no one on the interstate, just me and this other guy in the left lane, and the sign reads left lane ends, and they don't adjust their pace at all. And I think, what are you going to do? Like, seriously, you saw the sign? I saw the sign. What are you going to do? Are you going to go in front of me? That's fine. Are you going to go behind me? Also okay. I'm okay with either one of these. Then left lane ends half a mile, and they don't do anything. And I just think the entire time I'm driving, I'm looking ahead, but the entire time I'm just thinking, like, how's this going to play out, man? How's this going to go? Choose, just have an idea. That's all I'm looking for. One way or the other, have an idea. Left lane ends 1/4 mile, still right beside me. I'll slow down. Like, I've got no problem slowing down, but it's not my lane that ends. You choose. Just make a decision. I should not have to put off my cruise control, which I set on to make sure I don't get any more tickets, because you can't make a decision of speed up or slow down. So that's the first one. Second thing that really annoys me is when I walk into a fast food restaurant and they don't have like the big long turnstile line, but like a lot of McDonald's have these. For those of us who still eat at McDonald's, I know most of us got rid of it, but I still eat at McDonald's. I like their nuggets. So when we go into McDonald's and it's got like all the cash registers that are open, and there's someone like at each cash register, they're waiting on a customer, and then like there's one other person in line. So 5 registers open, 1 person in line, and they're just like chilling back here. And I walk up, and they like got their back against the wall. I can tell they haven't ordered yet. And I walk in, and I just think, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't stand behind you. There's no room behind you. Do you want me to just pick a register and see which one goes first? Like, you're not even in line. Like, that's the thing. Like, there's a line. That's how we know who's next, because there's a line. But you're not even in line. But I know you haven't ordered yet. And so I'm standing there trying to figure all this out while the next group of people come behind me. And I'm thinking, I don't want to cut them, but I don't want them to cut me. And there's no line. Like, I don't know where to go. This bothers me. Equally to the fact that when you pick the like fast food line that's got the 2 things and you pick the wrong one, oh man, that'll ruin your day. It's like, I'm busy, I picked the wrong one. One more, I probably shouldn't share this because you're gonna think that I'm a bad person, but we're here, so where else are we gonna go? So a couple of years ago, we took our family to Disney, and the happiest place on earth. And we're walking down the main street that ends in Cinderella's castle, which is lovely, and it is crowded. Like, it is very crowded. It is, like, I just can't emphasize how crowded it is. I have got no other. It's so crowded. And I just thought we're in the happiest place on earth. Like, we're making memories for our children for a lifetime. We're all going to operate in somewhat of a civilized manner because we're adults, right? Like, this is what I think I'm getting into. And then my ankle started to hurt. And I thought, why is my ankle hurting? And I realized that the person beside me had rammed into my ankle with their stroller, which, you say that like, this has got bad news as we keep going. Like, I thought that was going to be uncommon. Like, that was an accident. In Disney, strollers cease to be vehicles that you transport your children, and they become weapons to forge your way through a crowd. And I am not kidding about this. Like, people with the strollers were just like blazing a trail with their infant children in there because that's the only way they could get through. And on each one of these, like my interstate inconvenience, my fast food problems, and my Disney stroller pillaging warfare scenarios, the tension that I feel is it's not that I need to be first. I don't need to be first in line. I just need to know where I am in line. Like, I don't mind if the guy on the interstate gets ahead of me. That's not a problem. Just don't inconvenience me on that end. And the tension that I feel is the tension of like, I don't need to be first, but I don't want to be last. Like, I just want things to be somewhat even. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for things to be somewhat even. So here is the posture. This is the crowd participation part. If all of you, could you just put your arms like this? And I know some of you are sitting close to those around you, so it's kind of hard. Could you put your arms like this? This is the posture that we live our lives. Not the chicken dance. This is elbows out. And I know this is how we live our lives because this is how my children walk up the steps. This is how my kids line up in school. Like, everywhere they go, we'll say, hey, hurry up and go up. And so, like, one of them will be moving incredibly slow up the steps, and then the middle one will try to race past them, and the oldest will immediately elbows out. Like, no one's getting past me. No one's getting ahead. I have my elbows out at all times. And the thing that I've noticed is this is kind of how we live our lives. We live our lives elbows out. I don't need to be first. I don't want to be last. I just want to make sure that things are even, that no one's getting ahead of me, that no one's taking advantage of me. That's what I'm looking for. And here's the tension. Is we live our lives elbows out, but we live in a world that is inherently unfair, right? Every parent has explained to their children that life is not fair. In our house, we have a nice little statement that goes with it. Anytime my kids say that something isn't fair, I will respond, does Daddy care about fair? And they know the answer. They say, no. Daddy doesn't care about fair. It's not just a no. They have a complete sentence. No, Daddy doesn't care about fair. And this actually almost got me into a world of trouble a couple weeks ago. So we're at our house and things are chaotic because our small human beings are not listening to us and paying attention to us and not picking stuff up that we told them that they had to. And so while they're not picking the stuff up and life is generally chaotic, my wife looks at our oldest as she's walking up the steps and she says to her, it's not fair that you would leave all this stuff for me to pick up as your mom. And I'm sitting there on the couch just reading, hanging out, enjoying my life. And my 6-year-old daughter looks at her mother and says, Daddy doesn't care about fair. And I tell you what, I jumped into action. I was like, I am about to ruin my week, and I haven't done anything. Like, start barking out orders right away. I was like, I need to solve this right now, otherwise I'm in huge trouble. But here's the distinction. As we look at our relationships, we often live our relationships like this. We're competing. We're making sure someone doesn't get in front of us. We're making sure someone doesn't get ahead. As we look at our job, we don't need special privilege, right? We don't need special attention to us. We just want to make sure it's not happening to someone else. Like, that's the problem. I don't need anyone to look at me specially or significantly. I just need to make sure that it's not happening anywhere. And so we live our life elbows out. And this has a lot of problems. I mean, obviously, this living life this way will make us dissatisfied with everything. But the other thing is, it makes it really hard to be in relationship. You cannot be in a healthy relationship with someone who you are constantly competing with. You cannot be in a healthy relationship with someone who you're constantly worried about whether or not someone is getting ahead. And I think that's what makes this passage so striking and so unsettling, is that in a world that has always lived with our elbows out, Jesus chooses to kneel. And after he goes around and he does the work of a servant and washes each one of his disciples, and I can't overemphasize this, washes each one of his disciples' gross, dirty, disgusting feet. He sits up and he teaches them. And this is what he says in John 13, verse 12. It says, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right. If we could pause right there real quick. When he gives those statements, he's giving titles of significance. You call me teacher. You call me Lord. He's saying these are roles that are important. Now, with a title of significance comes two things, and we understand this in our culture. Comes added authority, right? And the assumption that that person doesn't do menial tasks. We don't expect the general manager to clean toilets, right? We don't expect that to happen. He's saying, you're right, when you give me these titles that show that I'm an important person, you are correct. But he does it right after doing the most servant-oriented work, the lowest level area of responsibility possible. He says, you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. Now, I hate this next part. I have given you an example to follow. I wish that said, this is a good idea to consider. This is a thought that you should dwell on. But that's not what he says. He doesn't say, hey, wouldn't the world be better if we all thought these kind of things and we had this mindset? He doesn't leave it optional. And that's what really stinks. He says, I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. He pauses after washing their feet and says, listen, I'm Lord, I'm teacher, and because I was willing to do this, so should you. And here's almost kind of like the rebuttal that's there at the end. If you don't, what you're saying is you're greater than me. Which I know every single one of us in a moment, we wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that, right? Like, I would not say ever in my life, well, I'm greater than Jesus. And yet, there are moments in which I do not desire to serve, because there are times that I have felt like things were beneath me. So let me give you an example. And this somewhat embarrasses me to share, but it's absolutely correct. So this past summer, our denomination had our General Assembly, which is when Nazarenes and Nazarene churches and people from all over the world come together. And so we go out to this. And as part of this, a thing that was new to me is the pastors of the larger churches in the United States, they get together. They kind of have a group, a peer learning group. And so I got to go to dinner with this group, which was like really exciting to me because this was a lot of people who I've looked up to, a lot of people who I've kind of followed over the years, people who didn't know me. And so I was really excited to be able to go to dinner with this group. So we go out to dinner and I am sitting across from the pastor of the largest Nazarene church in the United States, and I am sitting next to the guy who is the director of all USA and Canada. And so just to be clear, I'm a little bit geeking out right now, okay? Like teenage girl 5 years ago at a Justin Bieber concert. Like I'm trying to play it a little more cool than that because I don't have any of their pictures on my t-shirt, but I'm really excited to be there. And then this was the cool thing. Is so we're out to eat and we're at this nice restaurant, and over there, like people keep coming up and they keep introducing themselves to me. And I know who they are, but they act as if like it's brand new because they've never met me before. And so they come down, and some of them would come down and like, hey, so what's your name? I'm like, I'm Kevin Jack. I'm like, well, yeah, I know it's 2 first names. It's confusing. I understand. I've heard all the jokes. I get it. And they just like keep going. And then some of them would come up to me and they'd be like, so are you the youth pastor? I'm like, no, I'm not. That's right. And then like I got this from like 3 or 4 different guys who are part of the group. They're just like, you're so young. It's so great. You're so young. I was like, I know. I don't even shave. Like, I mean, that's how young I am, which is partially true, just to be clear. It doesn't happen often. But like person after person, and someone would come up and just like, it's really cool to have someone as young as you to be part of this group. And I was like, yeah, it is cool. And like, it just like those moments, like it was really cool. Like all these people who I knew introduced me. They're excited to meet me. They keep telling me how great it is to have me there. And so we get done with dinner, and I go back to my hotel room with all 6 members of my family, and it is chaos. Like there are diapers everywhere. Kids are jumping off all the furniture. Everyone is screaming at each other. I'm screaming at everyone. Like it is just absolute chaos. We've got, and I said 6 people in a hotel room. This is just a normal size hotel room. It's not a big hotel room. It's a normal size hotel room. And this is what I felt. This is what I felt in that moment. I don't want to be in this room. I want to go back to this room. That's what I felt. Because this is what happened. In this room, I have to scream at everyone. In this room, people want to hear what I have to say. When I'm in this room, I am expected to change diapers. That is what is anticipated from me. In this room, people want me to share stories. I want to be in this room. That's where I want to be. Now here's the problem. It's easy for me to believe in those moments that I belong in this room and not this room. And so I want to ask you just real quickly, do you have that? Is that in your life? Do you have moments in which you're called to serve significantly, and the only thing you can think of is I would rather be somewhere else? People value me more over there. And so the easy thing to believe is that that's where I should be. There's a story in this book, Leaders Eat Last, that has stuck with me. And I just want to read it directly for you because it is incredibly impactful for me. And I think it embodies these words that Jesus speaks so significantly. And the story is about a guy who was the former Undersecretary of Defense who spoke at a conference. And it says this. It says he took his place on the stage and began talking, sharing his prepared remarks with the audience. He paused to take a sip of coffee from the styrofoam cup he'd brought on stage with him. He took another sip, looked down at the cup, and smiled. "You know, I spoke here last year. I presented at this same conference on this same stage. But last year, I was still an undersecretary. I flew here in business class, and when I landed, there was someone waiting for me at the airport to take me to my hotel. Upon arriving at my hotel, there was someone else waiting for me. They had already checked me into the hotel, so they handed me my key and escorted me up to my room. The next morning when I came down, again, there was someone waiting for me in the lobby to drive me to this same venue that we are in today. I was taken through a back entrance, shown to the green room, and handed a cup of coffee in a beautiful ceramic cup. But this year, as I stand here to speak to you, I am no longer the undersecretary. I flew here coach class, and when I arrived at the airport yesterday, there was no one there to meet me. I took the taxi to the hotel, and when I got there, I checked myself in and went by myself to my room. This morning, I came down to the lobby and caught another taxi to come here. I came in the front door and found my way backstage. Once there, I asked one of the techs if there was any coffee. He pointed to a coffee machine on the table against the wall, so I walked over and poured myself a cup of coffee into this here styrofoam cup." And then I love this. "It occurs to me that the ceramic cup they gave me last year, it was never meant for me at all. It was meant for the position I held. I deserve a styrofoam cup. This is the most important lesson I can impart to all of you. All the perks, all the benefits and advantages you may get for the rank or position you hold, they aren't meant for you. They are meant for the role you fill. And when you leave your role, which you eventually will, they will give the ceramic cup to the person who replaces you, because you only ever deserved a styrofoam cup." I hear that story, and I think of how easy it is for me to slide into a belief that because I do work that is significant and valuable, that it makes me significant. And that isn't the case. The role I fill is important. The work I do is significant. But my value does not come from that. And as long as I'm operating on that level, my tendency in my work, in my relationships, in every arena I'm in, is to live my life with my elbows out, because I want things to be even. And I want to make sure that no one is being treated better than I am. And Jesus tells us to do something significant. He says, kneel, take a knee, serve. So this is what I do. Is when I kneel to tie my kids' shoes because they can't do it. I know how to tie shoes. I do work that is more important than tying shoes. But I kneel to slow down to their pace and their level to tie my kids' shoes. I kneel anytime I slow down my schedule to talk to someone, to discover how they're doing and what's going on in their life and how they're feeling. I kneel whenever I hold the door for someone. And not just in that spot where, like, just because they're behind me, I go ahead and grab it at the last second. No, I deliberately choose to serve someone. I kneel when I listen, when I would rather shout. I kneel when I defend the value of someone who I disagree with, instead of cheering on someone who's telling them how wrong they are. See, this is the distinction in terms of who we're called to become. And we want to live life in such a way that says, I want to get even, and if possible, I want to move ahead. And Jesus offers this incredible, not just idea, but example. He says, hey, what if instead of competing, what if you tried serving? What if instead of always attempting to get ahead, what if you tried helping those around you? What would happen? Now, here's the thing. I could very easily, we could just pray and go home and end the sermon here, and we would be theologically accurate. Like, we would be Bible-based. We would know what we need to know. But this is what I want to do, is I want to take this just one step further. Because the reason why we kneel, the reason why we serve, is because this is the example that Jesus offered to us. But I want to show you one more thing, and I want to show you what happens when you do this. And I don't want us to miss sight of this, because we do it because this is what Jesus did, and a servant is not greater than their master. But there is another piece to this of how the world changes when we actually engage in this. So this is Proverbs chapter 25. And this is a passage that is often misunderstood for good reason. So Proverbs 25, we're going to look at verse 21 and 22. It says this: if your enemies are hungry, give them food to eat. If they are thirsty, give them water to drink. Could we pause right here and just acknowledge, while that's literal, it's also metaphorical, okay? Like, you can do more for your enemies than just food and water, all right? So this is a broader thing that we're talking about. And then it says this: you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads, and the Lord will reward you. That's weird, right? Like, that's strange. Like, I give my enemy water, and I burn their scalp with fire. I'm in. Like, right? Anyone else look at that and go, that doesn't sound so bad right now. Like, I'm okay with that. This is what we need to understand. This is the cultural distinction within that passage. Is, first off, everyone in the first century, they carried things on their head. That's just how you did. You usually didn't carry things with your hand. Pots, jars, things like that, you carried them on your head. And what would often happen is that late at night, the fire within a household would go out. The fire within a house would go out. Now, instead of spending a lengthy amount of time attempting to restart that fire, what was expected is you would go to your neighbor's house to get a live coal to bring it back to your house to restart your fire. Because if you had no fire, you had no warmth, you had no way of cooking, you had no way of bringing life to those closest to you. Now let's look at that in light of this passage. He says, to those who you dislike the most, you should serve them. If they need food, give them food. If they need water, give them water. And in doing so, you will heap burning coals on their head. What this is saying is, it's not just a coal. You're not just giving them the bare minimum that they need to restart their fire, and in doing so, give life to those around them. No, you are to heap them, to go over and above, and the Lord will reward you. Paul actually quotes this passage in Romans chapter 12, and his summation at the end of it is, he says, in doing so, you will overcome evil with good. You will overcome evil with good. What both of these are saying is that when we take the posture of a servant, when we take a knee, we bring life to those around us. The burning coal gave life to a family. And he's saying, in the exact same terms, that is what the opportunity that you have to do. As I look at my relationships, I understand this clearly, that you can't lead those you're competing with. You cannot lead those you're competing with. If your elbows are out, you cannot influence those around you. And so what would it look like if we put our elbows down and we took a knee? So I want to ask you, how would your life be different? How would your life be different if you quit competing and you started serving? How would the world that you live in be different if instead of being focused on how you could get even or maybe even be ahead, if you instead asked, how can I help? What if instead of avoiding the environments in which our title or position or prestige doesn't matter, what if we jumped into them with the same involvement and the same enthusiasm as the environments in which people cared deeply about us? What would it look like for you if you started leading, if you started influencing, and if you did it through serving? How would your world be different? I think it could be incredible. And this is what we see. This is the thing that is just so amazing to me as we look at Jesus' actions. Is we often look at Jesus' actions on the cross and everything within there as merely symbolic. It's not just that, it's practical as well. It's practical as well, because what he is doing is he's not just showing us what he did for us throughout eternity. He's also showing how our daily lives should be different. And so this morning what we're going to do is we're going to take communion together. And I'd like to go ahead and invite the communion service, wherever you are, to go ahead and come down and take your spots. And please, as they're coming down, please don't miss this. Whenever Jesus broke the bread and took the cup as a symbol of his broken body and his blood that was poured out for each and every one of us, what he was doing in those moments is he was showing us what he was going to do, but he was also showing us how we are called to live. And I think sometimes we struggle because we get in moments like this and we view the bread and the cup as just symbols instead of as practical. And so I offer to you this morning, well, how would the world be different? How would your life be different if you put your elbows down and you took a knee and you served those around you? So in just a second, I'm going to pray for us, and then I want to invite you to come. Let's pray. Lord, I know in my own life that there is far too often that I want to avoid the rooms and the settings and the environments in which I am called to serve. And so often within my own heart, I reduce serving down to an event or an individual action instead of a lifestyle that I am called to embody. So Father, for me and for everyone else who is there who maybe has a similar struggle, let us understand that accomplishments, position, prestige, any of those things do not give us significance. That we are valued because we are sons and daughters of the Most High God. Sons and daughters of the Most High God. And in the same way the servant is not greater than his master, we are not greater than you. And so let us serve. Let us not be preoccupied with our own importance. And let us instead love those around us without an agenda or without any thought as to how this benefits us. May your crucified body and your blood poured out not just be salvation for us, but may they also be how we live our day-to-day life. And I pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.